In 1932, a woman in London claimed to possess an old carved wooden bed painted in red and gold that was haunted. Experts were of the opinion that it was crafted sometime around 1589. The woman had purchased the bed from its previous owner, a Frenchman, who had kept it in a barn and was non-committal about its history. When the new owner went to sleep in the old bed for the first time, she found herself thrown out of it by an unknown force, banging her head on a wall as she fell, and waking to find herself on the floor. Presuming herself to have simply fallen from the bed, she climbed back in to resume her sleep, only to find herself once more unceremoniously pushed back onto the floor. Some while later she attempted to get a good night's rest again, and managed to have 2 nights in the bed, albeit with an uneasy feeling all the while. Then on the 3rd night she woke to find a strange light in the room, and realized her frightened dog was in a corner, whimpering. Then she distinctly saw the image of a man being strangled, and then placed into the bed, and the corpse arranged so as to give the impression that he had died in his sleep. The owners of a house in Island Bay, Wellington, New Zealand, claimed in 1926 that they were driven from their home by a noisy ghost. For weeks, noises were heard in the roof space for which no rational explanation could be found. After the family departed, a clairvoyant stayed the night, and she claimed that the cause of the noises was the restless spirit of George Henslow, a sailor who had drowned when a whaling boat capsized in 1839. Evidently, the spirit of George was seeking a woman named Mabel, who had his money. Why he waited almost 100 years to claim his property was not explained. The family chose to rent the house to a tenant who was willing to brave living with the ghost of the drowned sailor. Brittany, France, is famous for its standing stones, such as those at Karnak. There once stood in the cemetery of a church along the road to Porteville a menhir 13 feet high, 8 feet wide, and 4 feet thick. The legend said that this massive stone had been placed atop a buried treasure to keep it secure forever. However, there was a soul imprisoned within the menhir, and it was allowed, on Christmas Eve, to walk some miles across the countryside to the fountain of Husay, where it drank of the water and then returned. The entire journey took just the 12 strokes of midnight by a clock to complete. In that time, if one was quick enough, they had a chance to steal the treasure before the menhir was back in place for another year. It is said that long ago, a group of villagers waited in the churchyard, but when the menhir failed to walk, they pulled it down and broke it into pieces, which lie there to this day. At the Singapore Coroner's Court in 1951, no less than 4 Malay witnesses testified that one of their relatives had been killed in his sleep by a ghost. The dead man was examined by doctors who pronounced that the cause of death was due to strangulation. However, they could not explain why there were no external marks on the victim's throat. The intersection of Church and Phillip Streets in Parramatta, New South Wales, is today a busy commercial area, far removed from its appearance in the 19th century, when on the corner stood a small rustic-looking inn typical of colonial Australia. It is said that here one night a brawl took place, which resulted in a man dying from his injuries. The luckless fellow was transported home in a cart. For many years after, locals claim to have seen a ghostly horse and cart trudging along the road near the man's former home at the midnight hour. According to the Empire Forestry Journal in 1926, the people of North Borneo respected a tree spirit called the hantu. This spirit dwelled within the kayawara tree, and a tree could not be cut down without the permission of the hantu. This was sought by driving a nail into the tree, or by leaving an axe stuck into it overnight. If the nail or the axe had fallen out by the next day, it was a sign that the tree was not to be damaged. At a cafe in Ipswich, Suffolk in 1950, a poltergeist was causing havoc. 11 people claimed that they saw cups fly through the air and crash to the floor over the course of a few days. Saucers, teapots, and plates were alleged to have jumped off the counter. The poltergeist was evidently not afraid of the law. A policeman called to the scene was met by the sight of cups smashing on the floor before him. The cafe was not named, but was probably the Eagle Street Cafe, which had been haunted through a succession of owners since the 1930s, and which is today considered to be one of the most haunted sites in Ipswich. Brooklands was a famous auto racetrack in Surrey, England, the first purpose-built racetrack in the world. It opened in 1907, and races were held there until August 1939. An aerodrome also operated here from 1909 to 1920, in later years under the control of the British military. During World War II, aircraft were made in factories on the site. Many lives were lost in air raids on the facility. Today, part of the old track remains, while the rest of the site is given over to industry, housing, and transport museums. In 1963, several workers at the Vickers aircraft plant revealed that they were being haunted by the figure of a man dressed like an old-time racer, in a flying helmet and brown leather coat. The plant had only been constructed 3 months earlier. One day, a worker saw a figure crossing the hangar and called out to him, saying that he must not go through the area he was walking in. Paying no heed, the figure kept walking and disappeared through a solid wall. The men said it had been disturbing at first, but they were slowly getting used to the presence of their phantom companion. Several drivers and mechanics had died at Brooklands when it was still a racing track, as well as aviators who had crashed at the airfield. Lindsay Campbell died in an air crash in August 1912, Sergeant Eric Dean in another air fatality in April 1914, and Margaret Welby in September 1928. Drivers known to have died include Percy Lambert, the first man to drive an automobile at over 100 miles per hour in October 1913, when his car somersaulted 3 times. J.A. Troop in August 1924, and Dario Resta, a famous driver of the day who crashed his Sunbeam at over 120 miles per hour while attempting a land speed record in September 1924. Resta had driven in the very first race held at Brooklands in 1907, and had gone on to win the Indianapolis 500 in 1916. The museum at Brooklands has Percy Lambert's Talbot, in which he set the world speed record in 1913, on display, and many suspect that the ghost seen is his.